The certified letter hit the metal box at 7:14 a.m. With a hollow thud I felt through the front porch planks. I carried it into the kitchen like a small explosive and slit it open with a paint scraper from my pocket. The Arizona Division of Child Support Services informed me, in plain bureaucratic type, that my wages would be garnished for a child in Santa Fe County, New Mexico, with their arrears calculated to the dollar and cents, and a case number I could hear even after I set the letter down. The envelope corners had a grit on them, the dust you get in Flagstaff when the wind has driven itself over the San Francisco peaks and let go of tiny stones. I read the paragraph where my name appears twice and the line where my signature is referenced and try to match those words against any moment in my life that would make them make sense. My coffee went cold on the counter, the surface a thin skin. I stared at the skin until it sank. I live in Coconino Estates, a neighborhood of mid-century ranch houses that look like crayons laid side by side, low roofs, brick chimneys, big windows designed for winters tougher than the one we got this year. My business, Ponderosa Reclaim Company, runs out of a rented garage off Humphrey Street behind a bike shop. I strip and refinish cabinets, build floating shelves from salvage joists, and ship handmade drawer pulls to homeowners who want their kitchens to look like the kitchen in a magazine. The shop smells like mineral spirits and pine. In winter the smell clings to my clothes the way garlic clings to a pan. My wife, Isla, is a flight attendant for Westport Air out of Phoenix. We've been married 4 years. She drives down the Minna 17 before dawn, parks at the employee lot by Sky Harbor, and disappears into a calendar of red and blue blocks that mark Boise or Burbank, Billings or Bakersfield. She sends photos from hotel windows rain on glass, a mountain in the distance, a tray table with a coffee cup, and a book I should read. The schedule makes alibis and silences in equal measure. The flight crews trade and swap and cover like a second economy. The app she uses to manage swaps, Crew Line, might as well be a stock ticker. We tried for kids the way couples try ambitiously, then methodically, and with a mix of superstition and clinical precision. 2 years ago, a urologist in a clinic behind the Sprouts on Milton broke the problem into a sentence I can write, but do not like to reread. A childhood case of mumps had scarred more than my memory. The printout with the numbers looked like a ruler that stopped short of zero. Isla held my hand in the parking lot while I watched the traffic light change at the corner, and thought about all the tools in my shop that work until a tiny part snaps and you cannot find the same part anymore. Money was the regular pressure behind the other pressures. Our HVAC died that July, the heat pushing through the roof shingles like a slow wave. We signed a loan with a promo rate that would unspool into something sharper if we missed a beat. My dad, down in Yuma, had a small stroke in the fall and the rehab co-pays piled like plywood sheets. My van needed a transmission at the exact moment the city decided to resurface our street, and my clients postponed projects because sanding doors sounded like a bad idea in a house full of dust. There had been red flags before the letter, but I folded them neatly and put them where I could not trip on them. Isla started keeping a small canister of travel-sized baby powder in her tote, which she said smelled like hotel sheets in a good way. The passenger seat in her Corolla developed a faint indentation you get when a car seat has been there and then not there. She said she had driven a friend's niece once, said the mother had been grateful. Receipts appeared in the bank activity from places with names that sounded like Playgrounds Rio Vista Pediatrics for $42, Juniper and Pines Learning Center for $58 on a Friday morning. Isla said it was a mistake with a card saved to the wrong account during a volunteer drive her airline does. The explanation hit me in the soft spot between wanting to be a generous husband and wanting to be an auditor. I held the certified letter by the corner over the sink like I could rinse the situation and let it air dry. The case number was DCSS E-4287314. The letter named a child born in Santa Fe County, New Mexico, 2 years and 5 months ago. It stated that I had acknowledged paternity with a voluntary acknowledgement of paternity filed at Cresta St. Vincent in Santa Fe the week after the birth, notarized and witnessed. They attached a copy. My name sat on the line where names go when you are meant to be permanent. I was in Flagstaff that whole week. The Arlo Pro 4 camera over my front door takes a photo at 7, one every weekday when the mail truck rolls by because the motion sensor threshold is set too low. That week shows me in the same hoodie bringing in the bin at 6:55 and the same green watering can by the porch rail. My QuickBooks mileage log shows the van going back and forth from Humphrey Street to a house on Birch Avenue where I was rebuilding built-ins along a brick fireplace, all straight lines within a small rectangle on the map. The app mark stops down to the second. I called the number on the letter. The woman who answered had a clean, neutral voice and went through her script. She confirmed my name and address and date of birth. She asked if I disputed paternity. I said I did. She said I would need to submit a formal contest within 30 days with proof, and she used the word proof in a way that had weight. She said I could request a DNA test, but that because I had signed a voluntary acknowledgement, I would need to show fraud or mistake to void it. She spelled out the steps: fill a particular form, sign in front of a notary, file it with the court clerk on San Francisco Street, include any supporting documents. She read me the garnishment percentages as if she were reading me Werther. I called my bank next. Mountain West Credit Union in downtown Flagstaff answers quickly if you hit 0. I asked them to freeze the joint credit card until I could figure out what else was using my name. I asked to open a separate checking under my business tax ID and to move my upcoming deposit there. The woman explained how to do it without tripping into a hold. She gave me a case number, and WCUF Armin is 199,845, and told me to pull my credit reports to see if any addresses or boxes I did not recognize had been added. The strange clarity of switching to steps calmed me. The way a measured cut quiets the skitter of a circular saw. My credit report listed an address I had not seen. A UPS store mailbox in Phoenix on North 16th Street with a suite number that sounds like an apartment when you say it fast. It had been added 18 months ago as an alternate mailing address. A new cell line had joined our family plan around the same time. A Galaxy at-12 paid in cash at the kiosk in the mall north of Phoenix. The usage logs show brief calls to a number in Santa Fe, always around noon. That same afternoon, my neighbour, Frank, the retired postmaster who spends mornings pruning his blue spruce into a perfect cone, knocked and asked whether we had a new addition to the family because he had seen a small folding stroller in our trash can on Tuesday, and he did not want to be nosy, but he had lifted it back up because it was too good to throw away if someone else could use it. His version of not being nosy includes remembering what day the recycling truck used to come before the city changed its route. I picked the stroller up from beside his garage. It had the grocery store receipt crumpled in the bottom with the date and time. The store was the Bash's on Butler. The time, 9:14 p.m., placed it after Isla's supposed trip had delayed in Boise per her text message that night. The cashier's name, printed in tiny font, matched the badge I've seen on a woman who has sold me rotisserie chicken. The list showed Cape Pops and travel-size baby shampoo and bananas with the Brannigan family produce sticker. I held the receipt like it might burn and then unfurl a different story. Isla arrived home the next morning, hugging a crew roller bag and the scent of airplane coffee. She said her Boise overnight had turned into 2 because of a crew timeout and a small mechanical. She placed it into the air of our kitchen the way you place a vase on a shelf. I watched her choose her words the way a steward chooses aisle or window. I asked her if she had a PO box in Phoenix for airline mail. She said yes. The union sometimes sent things there. I asked if she had ever listed me as the father of a child in New Mexico. She laughed like I had told her a joke in poor taste and asked me if I was all right. I said the letter had a copy of a signature. She said signatures could be anything if a scanner was involved. She set her bag down and poured coffee like it had a script. I watched her left hand shake like a line cut slightly too long. The UPS store on 16th Street in Phoenix smelled like cardboard and toner. I drove down on a Wednesday when I knew Isla's schedule put her in Orange County. The clerk looked at my Arizona driver's license and asked if I wanted to add a name to an existing mailbox. I said I wanted to know which names were already on it. He couldn't say privacy and all, but he could put a note in the file. The wall of small metal doors looked like drawers in an apothecary for lives you don't want anyone to see. As I turned to leave, a woman carrying a sack of padded envelopes opened the door. Something about her face taped a memory. She wore a Westport airline out with a small metal pin that denotes 5 years of service. I let her pass. I walked outside and sat on the curb like a person crashing at mile 19. I turned more stones. My emails promotions folder had a thank you for enrolling in the Family Plus package at the Flagstaff Athletic Club on Country Club Drive, dated last August, listing Isla as a primary member and me as a spouse, plus a household add-on for one dependent under 5. I had never set foot in that gym. The membership draft came from the joint card that I had not looked at line by line since I stopped doing the thing where I act like my marriage is a balance sheet. I pulled the ILO Pro 4 clips for the week the New Mexico birth certificate claimed I had signed anything in Santa Fe. The timestamp on our camera caught my making a late night run to the shop at 8 p.m. because I had left a clamp on a glue up in a way that would print a scar into the wood if it dried wrong. The camera captured my house cat stepping into frame with a slow, curious look. Cats give doorways like they suspect the outside is a rumor. The next morning, the same camera picked up me carrying the ladder to the back because a strip of soffit had blown loose. The Arlo stores everyone's mistakes and ordinary hours in the same folder. You have to be honest to find what you need. I told my mother. She lives in a stucco house off Route 66 with a garden of marigolds that look like a row of bride exits. She listened while I explained the letter and the case number and the impossible signature. She put her hand over mine and pressed it down onto the table as if to keep me from floating up. She asked if I had talked to a lawyer. She has the way mothers have of turning telegrams into instructions. I said I had not. She gave me a name scribbled in a small spiral notebook she keeps for important phone numbers, a woman who helped a friend of a friend when a custody case tangled. The lawyer's office sits on Lair Street, 2 blocks from the courthouse, where people in clean shoes argue about who will keep the kids on Thanksgiving. The waiting room has a mural of the peaks in watercolor. The lawyer took notes with a thick pen and asked for the letter, the copy of the acknowledgement, any photos of my signature I could produce, any proof of my whereabouts that week. I gave her a page from the old mortgage where my signature bends left because the officer had me sign something on a narrow podium. I gave her the Arlo clip timestamps and my mileage log. She explained that in Arizona, a voluntary acknowledgement can be rescinded within 60 days for any reason and after that for fraud, duress, or mistake. She explained interstate compact agreements. She said we could contest and ask for genetic testing, but we should do it quickly. She gave me a case number for her file FL-20292 and told me she would prepare the paperwork. The public scene came sooner than I would have staged it if I had been in charge of timing. Isla's parents invited us to Sunday lunch at a steakhouse on Aspen Avenue, a place with different kinds of butter for your bread, and a server who calls you by your last name because it is that kind of place. I brought a thin manila folder child support letter, copy of the acknowledgement, the gym membership, a printed screenshot of the UPS store address listing on my credit report. I had watched enough people, uncles and neighbours, try to handle family crises like guerrilla warfare in the garage and decided I would put this where the napkins are folded. We met at a round table under a mounted elk head that stares past everyone into a middle distance. I laid the letter down and said I had received it. I explained the garnishment and the signature and that I had never been to Santa Fe the week in question. I showed the Arlo Times and my mileage log and the work order from Birch Avenue with the date. Isla's mother shook her head and said the system gets wrong names on forms all the time. Her church friend had once received a bill for a pacemaker for a man named George with the same last name. Isla kept her eyes on the butter plate like butter might solve something. Her father's jaw moved and I could not tell if it was anger or chewing. The server kept filling water glasses even though they were full. I learned later that publicly presenting my evidence was both smart and cutting. It prevented the night version of the story from creeping in, the one where you argue over toothpaste caps and forget the documents. It also turned Isla into someone who would later tell friends I had humiliated her at a table where the napkins had their own metal rings. If I had kept it private, maybe I would have been kinder. If I had kept it private, perhaps we would have eaten steaks and nodded at traffic through the window and lied for 6 more months. Choices in marriages come with twin ghosts, the one who stayed and the one who left. The day after the lunch, Isla said she was switching to extra trips because the line bid had changed with summer, and she asked if I could handle the bills that week. She texted that she would transfer money from her separate account and then texted that the bank had placed a hold because of a suspicious out-of-state charge in Nevada. She would straighten it out in the morning. I told her in firm words typed slowly that I had frozen the joint card as a protective measure and opened a separate account for my business and personal expenses until the situation cleared. I said I would not be co-signing anything else without written terms. Boundaries feel like a mean dog when you are used to petting every dog on the street. That night I pulled Isla's crawler back from the cub to make room for the trash cans and noticed a toe of thin plastic peeking out from under the driver's seat. I slid the seat back and pulled out a small Ziploc holding a cruise pass lanyard from a gym, a single pacifier, and a printed waiver form for the soft play room at an indoor play center on 7th Street in Phoenix. The waiver had my name written in a hand that looked like my hand when I write standing up. The waiver listed a child with a first name that matched the one on the child support letter. The emergency contact listed Isla's number and mine. The date aligned with the day Isla had said she was dead heading home from Denver, and then adding a Tucson turn. I put the waiver in the folder with the letter. I set the pacifier on the counter because it felt cruel to put it in a named place. The day after, the woman at the UPS store in Phoenix called me back. She said, very careful about what she could say, that if I had concerns about identity use, I could file a police report and bring it to the store manager, who could then work with law enforcement to disclose who had provided what documents to open the mailbox. I started a report with the Flagstaff Police Department, a polite young officer whose name tag read T. Boucher. He took down the UPS store address and my evidence and gave me a report number, FPD ID Mina 76342, and told me to bring any new documents I found. He told me that this kind of thing happens more than people think, where couples think they share everything until they realize they share nothing that counts. The second twist came from a place that had nothing to do with boxes or babies. A letter arrived from our mortgage service noting that they had received a request to remove me from the homestead exemption and to add a secondary mailing address for occupancy verification. The secondary address was the UPS store in Phoenix. The request bore an e-signature with my name and a Google Voice number that was not mine. If the servicer had not flagged the mismatch between the e-signature location and my home IP address, it might have gone through. I called the servicer and spoke to a man whose training required him to stay calm. He said they would freeze any changes and annotate the file. I asked him to put a note that any address change requests would require in-branch notarization. He gave me a reference number and told me to change my online password. I did. I changed all my passwords, one by one, using a generator like a person pulling nails from a board that had been bent wrong 5 times. The third twist rose from my own health. Over the weeks, I did not sleep much, and the coffee I drank to prop my days arranged my heartbeats into a pattern that did not quite feel like music. My primary care, a woman in a quiet office above a small bookstore, had warned me once that stress would eventually demand a bill. I ignored the bill until I lay down one night and felt my heart flutter against my ribs like something trapped. I drove myself to the ER at Flagstaff Medical Center because I did not want to wake anyone. The nurse put electrodes on the pieces of me that still believed in steady numbers. The doctor said the word arrhythmia and the phrase probably benign and told me to follow up. The monitor beeped at a tempo that was not the same as my breath. I watched a stranger silhouette in the triage curtain next to me hug a sleeping child and thought about how I had wanted to be the person who could handle all the numbers. I requested the DNA test through the court. My lawyer's office drafted a letter to Isla giving 2 appointment options, a lab in town and a third in Phoenix, offering to pay, and stating that a refusal would be noted in our filing. The lab emailed me a confirmation code, swab kit ready at the front desk, precise as a shipping label. I set the letter next to the one from DCSS and the one from the mortgage and the one from the athletic club and looked at the stack like a small library of the person I had become. An independent witness stepped out at a place I did not expect. A barista at the coffee shop near the employee lot at Sky Harbor, where I sometimes stop on my way to pick Isla up if her schedule and mine align, recognized me as the husband of the woman who always ordered an almond milk latte and a cake pop for a little guy who liked to point at the pastry case and say a word that sounded like star. She told me, in the bright, casual tone people use when they share something they think will make you smile, that the boy had the biggest dimples and that she loved when Isla brought him in after long turns, both of them looking like they had flown all night and survived on sugar and caffeine. I nodded and thanked her. I stepped away from the counter and put my hands on my knees like I had come up too fast from a deep dive. The fourth twist came the afternoon I drove to Santa Fe because I thought standing inside the building that had stamped my name might make a new kind of sense. The hospital's records office on St. Michael's Drive smelled like disinfectant and paper. The clerk told me that New Mexico's vital records would handle the form I wanted to contest, but she gave me a copy of the hospital discharge paper for the mother listed on the certificate. There was a line for a support person present during the birth, and a name I knew but had filed under co-worker friends. It was a pilot Isla had flown with on long-haul Westport routes out of Phoenix when they picked up contract flights. His name neat and generic on paper, the kind of name that could slip into any story. Later, when I searched his name, I found a photo on a public profile, a man in a flight deck holding a toddler in a denim jacket in a way that looked like a guest had helped to hold a child. The caption on another photo mentioned Balloon Fiesta that year, a hot air balloon's bright arc in the background, Santa Fe Drive North. Back in Flagstaff, I put everything on the dining room table and arranged it like tiles: the DCSS letter, the acknowledgement copy, the UPS store address, the gym membership email, the placenta waiver, the mortgage letter, the ER EKG printout, the lab appointment notice. Isla came home that night and dropped her crew bag next to the coat closet. I explained and measured. Breath counting sentences what I had done, froze the joint card, opened a separate account, scheduled the test, filed the contest, started the police report, flagged the mortgage, placed a fraud alert on my credit, turned off the extra cell line that I was paying for because I had not noticed it for a year. Isla stared at the table like looking would rearrange the tiles. She said I had made a private problem into a public one. She said I was breaking trust by acting unilaterally. She said I had crossed a line by telling her parents anything. Gaslighting is the name people give to this dynamic, and I used to think it was a dramatic word until I felt my legs sliding even on a floor I had mopped an hour earlier. Would you demand the test now and risk setting a future on fire, or would you wait and watch the fire come to you? That question sat in my mouth like a coin. The day of the test, Isla did not show. The lab tech told me they would hold the kit for 72 hours and then mark it as missed. My lawyer filed a motion noting the refusal, attaching the letter. The court set a hearing date in 2 months because courts move the way rivers move in winter. The garnishment would begin in 3 pay cycles unless stayed. I recalculated my month like a carpenter recalculates a cut after finding a stud where the stud was not supposed to be. I took more steps because steps are what you do when the ground shifts. I moved into a month-to-month over a bicycle shop on Beaver Street, 3 rooms with hardwood floors that creaked the way honest floors do. I carried boxes up the narrow stairs and felt the weight in my hands in a way that felt fair. I told the bike shop owner I would not be drilling anything into the south wall, and he laughed because he has heard everything. The first night there, I lay on a mattress that had not learned my shape yet and listened to trains in the distance like confessionals. Flagstaff is small in the ways that matter. You cannot sneeze without someone asking if you need it tissue. A woman from my church texted me a heart and then a question mark. The neighbour on the other side of my old house, a middle school science teacher named Penny who leaves mason bee houses in her yard, said she would water the front marigolds if I needed. The crew scheduler for Westport, who had liked 2 of my woodworking posts a lifetime ago, sent a message to my business account asking whether I had availability for a built-in, and then added a line that he did not want to overstep but that he thought I should know the pilot had been reprimanded last year for fraternizing, which meant nothing on paper and everything between lines. One afternoon, a letter came to the apartment with the return address of the Flagstaff Athletic Club. They were updating their household membership policies and require proof of residency for dependents. The letter was addressed to Isla at my new address, which she did not have, because the membership used my name and any address change on my credit profile triggered a mass update. I held the letter and thought about how systems knit themselves around the data you feed them and then resist a knitting when you need them to. My father called from Yuma and asked, in the voice he uses when he wants to be careful and practical, if I was eating enough. He wanted to talk about quarterbacks and rainfall turtles. Then he asked whether I thought Isla was capable of maliciously binding my name to another life. He said in a strange, flat way that the year after he and my mother divorced, a woman had put his name on a cable bill and it had taken 3 months of crowded Monday mornings at the service centre to get it removed. He said sometimes people do paperwork to each other, like paper is a weapon and a shield depending on the angle. He said his arrhythmia had gotten better when he walked the golf course instead of taking the cart. He said he loved me. We both pretended not to hear each other, not saying it out loud. The 5th twist, the one that made me sit down on the floor with my back against the dishwasher, arrived as an email from DCSS. The subject line began with the words Notice of Interstate Enforcement and then folded my name into it like an afterthought. New Mexico had transferred the case to Arizona for enforcement. There was a scanned copy of the voluntary acknowledgement with my name printed with machine neatness and a signature that looked like mine if my hand had been asked to lie in front of a stranger and a notary who had a line to be. The notary's stamp said Nessa Giles, Santa Fe County. I called her office. She answered. I explained the situation with outrage. She pulled her log and said she had recorded 2 women and a man signing the day in question, the man presenting an Arizona driver's license with my name. She remembered because she writes a small note when a client has traveled from another state, and one of the women had mentioned Phoenix. She said she could email the ID copy in the file if law enforcement requested it. I called Officer Boucher and gave him the name and asked him to request a copy. He did. He called me back an hour later and said the ID in the file showed my photo and my details, but the signature on the back, the one the MVD uses for verification, did not match the one in my MVD record. He said they would open an investigation for criminal impersonation. He said that if I had any idea who might have done this, now was the time to mention it. I stayed silent on names because I still wanted to keep one window in my life open. By then the bike shop below my apartment had learned my name and the rhythm of my steps. The owner, a woman who wears a bandana like a flag, handed me a note left by courier, service of process from Isla's attorney, who had filed a response to my contest claiming that I had known about the child, had agreed to help with insurance at first, and was now retaliating because of our fertility diagnosis. Reading my life through the lens of someone else's brief felt like looking at my reflection in an old spoon. I circled the statements that turned my actions into tantrums and drew lines in the margin where facts go. I sent a certified letter to DCSS with my contest form, my urologist's statement, the Arlo screenshots, and a notarized affidavit. I walked the envelope to the post office on Cherry Avenue and handed it to a clerk who stamped the green return receipt with a thunk that sounded both official and lonely. I wrote the certified number down in my notebook because numbers feel like fence posts when you cannot see the road. The public fallout showed up at church 2 Sundays later. We attend a small congregation that meets in a converted storefront on North Switzer Canyon Drive. The pastor, a woman who can fix a copier better than anyone, preached about truth and kindness, and I felt the heat of 70 pairs of eyes that pretended not to be curious. After the service, a deacon handed me a casserole because that is what people do when they do not know what else to hand you. Isla stood near the coffee table and gave hugs to people who leaned in and whispered. One woman squeezed my arm and said she was praying for our sweet family, and I wanted to ask which version of our sweet family lived in her head. A child ran past and knocked over the stack of styrofoam cups, and the sun made 3 people jump. The day the garnishment hit my paycheck felt like a punch I had seen coming in slow motion. The line item sat under tax is like a new, permanent county. I stared at my direct deposit screen until the numbers blurred. I recalculated. I postponed ordering sloughs for a client's kitchen islands because cash flow is less abstract than marriage. I booked more smaller projects because small checks land more often than large ones. I told a couple who had waited patiently for me to measure the pantry that I would give them a discount because I would not be late again. I wrote the word survival on a sticky note as if it were a task I could complete. Strangers online would tell me I should have left the minute I found the playroom waiver. Friends would tell me I should have waited until the test had been taken because then the paper would have hugged the argument. Both are tidy positions that look good on a timeline. Life has no room for tidy when the bank wants its money and the court calendar wants your patience. I left enough to keep breathing and stayed enough to keep the roof I had paid for from collapsing into story. On a sunny Friday in May, the caseworker called. She said that the DNA test had been scheduled by the other party at a lab in Phoenix for the following Thursday. She did not say whether the other party was Isla or the mother, whose name I had learned from a birth record but had tried not to say out loud because saying names feels like promises you cannot keep. She said results would take 10 days. She said garnishment would continue until then. She said she appreciated my documentation because it made her job easier in a process that is usually long on immersion and short on paper. That same afternoon, a tax preparer I had used for my business 2 years ago left a voicemail saying that someone had called his office asking for copies of my previous returns to submit to a mortgage lender. He had told them he needed my written consent. They had said they would have me call. I did not call because I had not asked for any copies. I changed the password on the IRS portal and set a PIN because you can put pins on your life like safety pins hold together fabric that wants to split. At this point, you could draw a map of my days and pin small flags where lies took root. The passenger side indentation that never fully popped back up. The baby scented powder that did not smell like hotel sheets. The daycare charges that hid among fuel and lumber and coffee shop totals. The church hugs that landed like opinions. The pilot's generic name printed on a hospital discharge paper. The financial forms that attempted to cancel me with the quiet efficiency of a clerk with a stack to get through before lunch. I do not get to write the outcome here that would turn this into a fable. What I can write is the aftermath I am living. I live over a bicycle shop. I make doors and shelves and small boxes. I meet with my lawyer in her thick pen. I belong to a fraud alert list and a court docket and an exhausted congregation. I freeze what must be frozen. I open what must be opened. I carry a notebook where I write case numbers like contact names and stick receipts under paper clips like photographs. Sometimes late, I walk past my old house. It sits quiet, its porch like a small circle on the concrete. Frank, the retired postmaster, stands in his yard with his blue spruce and waves with 2 fingers, the way men of a certain age wave when they both know and do not want to wreck your night by making you explain. I nod. I keep walking. The wind wears the smell of pine and dust. The arlo over the door is still aimed at the spot where motion triggers every day at 7 when the truck goes by. On those nights, I ask myself the second question that will not stop asking itself. Is a boundary a fence you build around what remains, or is it a line you draw across a map you will never follow again? If the test comes back the way my urologist numbers predict, then the math will let me under the fence without losing any more fingers than I have already. If it comes back in a third, impossible way people like to invent that ways when there are only 2, I will adjust my hammer and make a different cut. Faith is sometimes telling yourself you will be able to cut again even if the last board splintered. The last image I have to give you for now is more sound than sight. It is the soft slap of a certified letter sliding through a metal slot somewhere below my apartment and hitting the floor of a shop that smells like rubber and chain lube. It is the thud of the green return receipt card stamp in the post office. It is the click of an arlo clip beginning at 7, one with a view of an empty sidewalk and a mail carrier in a blue hat moving from house to house with an unhurried grace. The sound echoes the one that started this, the hollow thud that changed coffee to concrete. I stand there, in my small apartment, with a folder of numbers I can recite like prayer and a heart that comes and goes like a tide, trying to decide whether the next envelope is a threat or a tool, and knowing it might be both.